Welcome to the Money Minus Shame podcast powered by the Financial Therapy Clinical Institute, where we make money human. Here, we eliminate shame from the financial experience and drive money conversations to be holistic and human first. I'm your host, Nate Astle, and welcome to Money Minus Shame. Hello and welcome to the Money Minus Shame podcast, where we take the shame out of money. We are powered by the Financial Therapy Clinical Institute. I'm your host, Nate Astle, and I am joined today with Tyrone White, our COO. Tyrone, how's it going? What are we talking about today?
Everything's going great, and we're going to talk about money conflict with couples. So I'm excited. Definitely want to know more when it comes to money conflict with couples. So can you give us like a brief overview of what that looks like?
Yeah, so couples fight about money. That's maybe not a big surprise, but it's a huge piece of why people get stuck. People may have heard that, financial conflict is one of the major causes of divorce. If you've been listening to this podcast, you know that money is inherently this deep emotional thing, and that only gets more complicated with couples. So you have now, instead of one person's thoughts or beliefs or emotions, behaviors, now we got two or more that are impacting what's going on in the system. So it makes things more complicated, but I also think that's where a lot of growth and a lot of fun happens, is in relationships. A lot of our healing happens in relationships as well.
So if a couple's having conflict with money, what are some things that they should do? Should they seek out just traditional therapists, or should they go see maybe something more specific like financial therapists? And what would that look like in financial therapy?
Yeah, so I definitely think that there are certain couples therapists. You would want to go to a couples therapist that can help with certain money things. However, like all professionals, unless they have the specific training to treat or work with that kind of presenting issue, generally you do want to find the right person for you. The thing about working with couples in therapy is it feels a little different than individual therapy. If you've ever been to your individual therapist before, it's all about you, right? As it should be, but it's all about how do we work with what's going on in your mind? How do we work with your thoughts or your feelings, behaviors, processing your traumas? And my job as a therapist is to be on your side, not to agree with you necessarily, but to have your well-being as the center goal, right? In couples therapy, I am still on both parties' sides in that I want both parties to succeed in things. But specifically, the place that I'm holding for is I am on the side of the relationship. And so what that means is sometimes I have to prioritize relationships, functioning relationship healing, which I do believe then impacts individual experience too. But it's just a little bit different in that I'm pro-relationship when it comes to couples therapy or working with couples around money. I'm prioritizing the relationship's happiness, satisfaction, which often includes the individual happiness and satisfaction as well.
When couples are having money conflict, sometimes one person wants to seek help and the other individual doesn't in the relationship. Do you have any techniques or any advice to a person to try to get them both to go to have therapy when it comes to money?
It's a hard situation. It's one that comes up very often. The truth is you can't force people to go to therapy. And maybe more specifically, you can't force people to change. That's true for everybody, including therapists. A lot of times, couples come into therapy where one of them really wants to go and one of them is a little more hesitant, or may really just be going so that my partner will stop complaining about it. Maybe I don't think that therapy works or is real. Maybe I just feel like I'm being dragged by the ear into therapy. Those tend to be a little more slow going. It's hard. So I just want to start with validating. As far as techniques or anything, the simple way is just to be like, hey, it's because I care about you and it's because I care about us that I think that this couples therapy or professional support is meaningful and important right now. Don't trick people. Don't be manipulative. Just be honest, direct as you can be, and acknowledging that when it comes to a couple, it takes two to tango. Like, we both have to be willing to put in the work. And so we may have our resistances, which is totally fine, but you just don't want it to feel like I'm dragging the other person, because the truth is therapy might not be very successful if the other person isn't bought in.
I can see that being the case for sure. What are some signs that maybe they should go get that extra help when it comes to getting a financial therapist if they're having conflicts with money?
A really important thing when it comes to couples is it's not what you fight about, it's how you fight. having conflict, having disagreements or a different perspective or different beliefs or philosophies around money doesn't inherently spell the doom of your relationship. All it means is, okay, it's something that we see differently. The real reason that people get stuck and in trouble in their relationships is when how we go about trying to solve the issue is not helpful or potentially harmful. So, for example, my partner and I disagree about what our long-term savings plan should be. I want to prioritize more trips, and they want to prioritize more savings for retirement. It's not that either one of us are right and wrong. The problem becomes when we start calling each other names, or we start shutting down, or we get defensive. It's the process that we engage in the middle of conflict. That's the thing that tends to lead to bigger fights, potentially the relationship ending. So if you don't know if you need couples therapy, one, it is okay to test it out, to see if, hey, I think, I really value our relationship. And I do think that there's some things that we can be doing better that maybe we get in our own way with our conflict. Maybe we can try a couple of sessions. I think that's totally valid. Certainly, if you are having conflict where, we're shutting down, we're not able to be around each other, we're avoiding money topics, we're screaming or calling each other names, slamming doors. If that kind of escalating behavior is happening, it's probably worth having someone at least give you some tools. I will say that in general, the sooner the better when it comes to working through the conflict. Resentment is like a poison. If we don't take care of it and we don't talk about it and we don't treat it, it spreads and it starts showing up in other areas of our life and it starts showing up in our day-to-day conversations or how we raise our kid or what movie we want to watch tonight. Like, it's really important not to let resentment fester. Sometimes we don't always know that resentment is festering, but as soon as you start noticing, wow, I really am having a hard time connecting with my partner, maybe specifically around money, it's time to get some extra help.
So, if say the couple's having issues and they come see a financial therapist, what are some things that they go over, like goal setting? Will they go over the most of the money? Will there be any budgeting? What things are usually going over in the financial therapy sessions?
Part of it depends on what they're looking for and what they, need. I will say a big part of what I do is helping couples see what's called the couple conflict cycle. Basically, when we have conflict or fights or arguments, whatever you call them, when we have a conflict area, we tend to follow a similar pattern over and over and over again. So, for example, I want to save for trips and my partner wants to save for retirement. I feel that they don't care about us having fun. And I start thinking, oh, there's such a tightwad. I start thinking I'm the only one that cares about us actually enjoying life. We're just always responding to their fear. And then in my behavior, I start, bugging them or I ask questions a lot or I kind of pursue some kind of resolution. When I do that, my partner then starts feeling like my partner doesn't care about our long-term security. They're so irresponsible. That scares me. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm the only grown-up in this relationship. And then they start behaving by getting defensive or withdrawing from these conversations because it never works. And the more that they withdraw, the more that I pursue, the more that I pursue, the more that they withdraw. This is an example of a couple conflict cycle where my stuff, my emotions, my thoughts, and my behaviors trigger and reinforce your stuff, which then reinforces my stuff. This pattern is something I think is really helpful to work on exploring with couples, exploring what it is, exploring where it came from, because your enemy isn't your partner. The problem is the problem. It's not your partners. And so it can't be a me versus you. It's you and me versus the problem. And the problem is the cycle itself. The problem isn't that I have stuff and that you have stuff. It's that when we aren't taking care of our stuff, it ends up triggering and reinforcing your traumas and your experience. When I map this out with couples, I think what it does is it creates the shared enemy, this shared thing that you and I are on a team and we're tackling this monster from different angles. I've got my responsibilities, you've got your responsibilities. But by doing so, we're actually kind of tackling this thing together rather than well, you're the problem and, that kind of place.
I work with couples as well. And sometimes when you really want to work and you see conflict, it's like one person still decides to go. Would you still recommend that one person go to financial therapy, even though you see it's like couples conflict? Could it possibly still help if that one individual just want to go goes?
Yeah, I think any resource is important. And so if my partner is unable or unwilling to go to couples therapy, then I still think it's important to go and get your own support because I can't change my partner. I can't make them do something. But it is important that I'm taking care of myself. Now, when you do that, you just need to know my therapist isn't able to fix my partner from afar. They don't have that kind of power. My therapist is there to support me as I navigate my relationship with my partner in whatever way makes sense, in whatever way is best for me and what I value. So, yes, I do think extra support is better than no support, but a good therapist won't try to do couples therapy with just one person. They will try and help the one person work through what they need to work through, support them in the way they need supported, so that hopefully they can show up differently for the relationship and or decide that the relationship isn't worth keeping, which is a really tough thing to decide. When you go to couples therapy with just one person, it usually doesn't really work. And honestly, sometimes what happens, it just creates more frustration, resentment. Because now I'm going through all this work. How come you're not? That's just not how it works.
Yeah. If somebody's interested in getting financial therapy, will insurance cover it? Like, how would they pay for the cost? Is that a possibility or?
Typically, the answer is no. Traditional psychotherapy is a medical service, okay? And so there's a diagnosis, and we're treating the diagnosis. So someone gets diagnosed with major depressive disorder or bipolar or PTSD, and then the things that you talk about or assignments and all that kind of stuff that your therapist does is so that you can treat this diagnosis. That's why some insurances will cover therapy. Insurances typically don't even cover couples therapy because there's not really a diagnosis for that. Sometimes what insurance will do, and it's kind of a workaround and there's ethics around this, but maybe I'm treating someone's depression, but a major source of their depression is the relationship challenges with their partner, in which case I might be able to justify some sessions to be covered by insurance. Financial therapy, though, is such a new field and it's so outside the norm of, there's no diagnosis for money problems necessarily. Typically, insurance is not something that will cover financial therapy. What I do recommend is seeing a provider that has a sliding fee scale where what you pay is based on your income or something like that, because hopefully it makes it a little bit more affordable. The truth is, it can be really hard to get services. Working at the Financial Therapy Clinical Institute, like we hear about people that either can't afford or their normal therapist isn't comfortable working with money. It's a big problem. So yeah, get the help wherever you can. There is a lot of support. There's a lot of options out here as far as how do I start to heal my relationship with money with my partner. It's a complicated process. There's going to be lots of feelings and a lot of work, but it also can be incredibly healing and rejuvenating and life-giving. To oversell it, I do think that it's something worth pursuing.
And financial therapy, pretty new. How can someone find a financial therapist? Like, what's a good place to look them up? Should I just Google it, or is there a place to search for
Yeah,
help?
so the Financial Therapy Association is kind of the professional organization or body of financial therapists. They have a tab on their website. It's find an FT or a financial therapist. The Financial Therapy Clinical Institute has slots for clients, but even just Googling it is a start. What I will say though is because financial therapy is not a regulated term, you just want to double check that the person you're meeting with has the skills, the training, the background to help you with what you're needing. So there's some financial planners, for example, that get training in financial therapy, but they are going to think differently about how do we work with someone than someone who has a mental health background. If you're like, well, I think the problem is mostly numbers and planning, but I need just a little bit of coaching or psychological support, then maybe a financial planner with a financial therapy background is helpful. If it feels like this is very emotional, this is very psychologically driven, I can recognize that there's some mental blocks here, or maybe there's a relationship issue, then I would say, yeah, getting a mental health trained professional is going to be more advantageous to you.
Yeah, I like how you broke that down. That's the first time I heard that broken down between the two. So I appreciate you. So, what are some conflicts that you see in couples?
There's quite a few, I think, that show up fairly frequently. One is some kind of disagreement about how we're spending. So maybe one person is spending all of our retirement, or maybe someone has kind of this compulsive shopping thing, or maybe there's some major purchase that only one person really cares about. Differences in how we spend is super, super common. But as I was saying, if we get stuck in how we fight about this thing, it can get nasty and it can lead both parties to being just kind of miserable.
Something that shocked me when I first was getting to the field of personal finance, work with couples, was financial infidelity, and seeing people's reaction to it really shocked me. I remember one situation where there were a couple, one of the couples spent their entire retirement, it was about $500,000, and the other person, they were so bothered by it, they said they had physical reactions to it, had to leave the house for a while. That really sticks out in my mind of like a conflict that happened. I was like, hey, yeah, definitely need some type of financial therapy. This goes beyond my scope, working with numbers and coaching. Is there anything that you've seen with financial infidelity or any other couples conflicts that really caught you off guard?
Financial infidelity is something that I don't think we talk about it enough because it's incredibly common. With statistics, of course, take it with a grain of salt, but it's something like 30% of couples experience financial infidelity. Financial infidelity, if you haven't heard this term before, it just refers to any kind of betrayal of trust around money. It can be things like hiding credit cards or, secret bank accounts, secret debts, that kind of stuff. But honestly, financial infidelity can be things like not telling my partner how much something costs, or minimizing or lying about how much something costs. It can be just money secrets, especially if there's the expectation that we share. That kind of stuff leads to feelings of betrayal, feelings of fear, feelings of anger. It really isn't that different from sexual infidelity. I know, obviously, sexual infidelity is something that all of us oh yeah, obviously a big no-no, don't do that. But money is something we don't talk about at all, and so we aren't clear about our expectations. We have so much shame around money. It leads to this culture where I think financial infidelity behaviors or experiences is kind of just the norm. How many times have we seen on TV or whatever that, oh, just don't tell your dad that we bought this? Or,
Yeah.
those little things I think really promote issues that end up needing to come to our offices because it hurts. It hurts people. It hurts relationships.
Something I worked with quite a bit is both sides, male and female, women and men, is the feeling that they need to protect themselves by secretly stashing money. And then the other person finds out. That draws a lot of conflict between the two when the other person finds out that they've been hiding money. Have you seen that at all?
It's a really nuanced thing because honestly, I do think that there are cases where that might be important, especially in cases where there's domestic violence or a divorce is coming and I'm afraid of not having anything. I think it's too broad of a thing to be this is good or bad. But what I will say is, in big asterisk here, in healthy relationships, information is shared. Even if that's something that we both agree, hey, let's have a me account, let's have a you account, so that way, even though we're not planning on this relationship ending, we're taking care of us. Maybe it's just a psychological safety thing. It's I have absolutely no interest in a relationship ending, and it helps me feel really safe to have this, $5,000 in this other account or however much money it is. But the problems occur when we don't talk about stuff, and the problems occur when we make assumptions on our expectations when our expectations aren't explicit. If we're not saying, this is what I am thinking, expecting that our money value culture is in our relationship, kind of setting ourselves up for disappointment because it's not always obvious. It's just the same reason with sex stuff. It's important to talk about. Is it cheating when we talk to an ex on social media? Is it cheating when we look at porn? If you don't define what cheating is and something happens, it's going to be a problem potentially later on. So define what your relationship values are for money. You're going to be a lot better off, at least a lot more clear.
Something also I work with conflicts with couples, and I definitely want to hear your experiences. And sometimes it works. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But sometimes I say sometimes there's a spender in a relationship and a saver. And something I remember is a couple I was working with, one of the people were spending and just spending because they want to live life. They want to enjoy it. They got the money. They want to do it while they're still young, not too old, that type of whole thing. And then the other person's like, why can't you stop spending? Like, we need to protect ourselves, like really big on building that security because they're afraid that the money's going to go away and they wouldn't have that protection. That happens quite a bit too. Do you have any experiences with that?
Super common. I would say, honestly, on some level, it's every couple. There's always going to be differences in how people like to live their financial life. And that's not right or wrong. I think that's one of the big missteps that we make is moralizing saving and moralizing spending. I think how we moralize it is we say things like irresponsible or undisciplined or a tightwad or stingy. And it's just, I feel like one, it's not helpful because when you think about it, both roles are important. I have worked with many people that get to the end of their lives with $2 million in their bank account, wishing that they had lived more life, that they had spent more of that money on things that would have been meaningful to them.
Yeah, I just seen that the other day. There's a lot of financial infidelity going on in relationships. And like you said before, there's so many different aspects of it, of whether hiding money or hiding things in the relationships. And it really impacts the couples when those things happen.
It really does. I think because there's this culture around money that we don't really talk about it. It's private, it's secret, and it just leads to a lot of us feeling isolated. I had a couple fairly recently that she had bipolar disorder. She didn't know, but the reason that they kind of got tipped off to it was because she would go on these spending sprees. And sometimes she would like black out and not even remember all the things that she bought until 50 Amazon packages showed up at their door. And part of what we were doing in therapy is working on obviously her compulsive spending and the things that happens in her manic episodes, but also just the feelings of hurt and betrayal that her partner was experiencing because he cared a lot about her, but he was very, very frustrated, especially because I think she also has some peculiar, maybe higher quality tastes. And so it was, thousands and thousands of dollars. Although this case was a big case, it was a lot of processing and a lot of work. That kind of thing happens all the time where we don't think about how our financial behaviors impact other people. Even if my partner and I don't share a bank account, we still have impact on other people. So I think it's just something we really need to open the door to talking about this more and in couples, and also making sure people know like going to couples financial therapy is a good idea. It exists, it's important, and it can be very helpful.
Something you brought up that I found interesting is the couple that came to you. You said the person didn't know they had some type of disorder and then later they found out. Do you think that happens in your experience? I know that you don't diagnose when you're working with people, but do you see things that maybe they should possibly go get help that's impacting the couples, whether it's a relationship or money?
Absolutely. Money is never about the money or the numbers. The way I think about it, money is this language that we paint every other part of our lives onto, including our mental health challenges. So, working on your relationship with money may help with feelings of anxiety or depression, may help with working with your ADHD better, all that kind of stuff. But it also works in reverse. By working on depression or anxiety or other mental health diagnoses with a traditional therapist or psychiatrist or psychologist can also impact your money. It can be a reinforcing cycle for both positive and negative. If we're not working on our stuff, it can impact our finances. If we're not working on our finances, it can impact our stuff. And the reverse, if we're working well, things can get better as well. So it's always important to get all the help that you can that is reasonable and that you can afford and all that, but get the help that you can. Thank you all for listening. This has been such a good conversation. Thank you, Tyrone, for bringing this up, for making this something that we talk about, because it is something that affects so many people. We are just starting to scratch the surface on what financial conflict looks like with couples. We're just starting to scratch the surface with things like financial infidelity and how do we heal and break through some of these cycles. I'm excited for us to keep diving into this in future episodes. For all you listeners, make sure that you are subscribed, and we will see you next time on the Money Minus Shame podcast. Thanks for listening to the Money Minus Shame podcast, powered by the Financial Therapy Clinical Institute. This podcast is not meant to be a substitute for mental health services or financial advice. This is a cafeteria where you can take what you like and leave the rest. Make sure to like and subscribe so you're the first to know when new episodes drop. And if you like what you hear, let us know. Reach out at money-shame@gmail.com or send us a DM with thoughts, questions, or topics you'd like to see us cover. Take care of yourself out there, and we'll see you next time.